Hi there and welcome to AC's 8-Bit Zone. In today's episode I'm going to show you how to use a serial cable to transfer files from real floppy disks to your PC on a virtual disk and back and forth. This is a simple and low-cost way to back up your old files or to work with new files that you're working on. In my case, I had this old disk from when I was a teenager, and I was able to retrieve, seems most of the contents of this floppy, and now I can view the basic programs over on my PC in a modern text editor. And I can make edits in the text editor and save them back to the real floppy if I wish to. So this is a quick and easy way for you to add another tool to your toolkit. Alright, let's get started. A Coco 1, 2, or 3 will work. You'll need your floppy disk drive and a floppy diskette. If you don't have a PROM burned with HDB-DOS, you'll need a cassette cable. You'll also need the DriveWire serial cable and a USB to serial converter to connect it to the PC, like this one here. And you'll need your PC running DriveWire. Now let's connect the cassette cable to the back of the Coco. And let's connect the serial cable. It's a 4-pin DIN. And the other end of the cassette cable connects to the PC's speaker output. And the serial cable with USB converter can connect to any of your PC's USB ports. Okay, this is my Coco 2 and a floppy disk controller with drive 0 and drive 1. Something's wrong with my drive 0 that I'll need to troubleshoot later, so today I'll be using drive 1. And I've booted into the standard RS-DOS. So this is Disk Extended Color Basic, or RS-DOS. The tools we're going to be learning today are, first of all, we'll need HDB-DOS, which can either be programmed onto a ROM and updated in your disk controller, or the sort of shortcut method that I'm going to show you today. If you don't have a ROM, you can just simply load the HDB-DOS from a cassette or a WAV file. Okay, so we'll be using HDB-DOS, we'll be using DriveWire 3, and then a set of tools called Toolshed. And all these tools are available for PCs and Macs, and I think Linux as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to load HDB-DOS, which stands for hard drive, I think, basic DOS. So we need HDB-DOS loaded. So the way to do that is to load from the cassette, and you can do it all in one command like this, or you can load from the cassette, then go over to your PC and play the appropriate WAV file for the Coco 2. Okay, and we're not hearing the tones right now, but the Coco has identified the file name. And it's going to take about a minute to load this from the pseudo cassette player. Okay, now we'll execute the binary. And we've rebooted into HDB-DOS. Okay, this is great. And it's showing compatibility with DriveWire 3. Okay, next over on your PC, you'll launch DriveWire 3 and make sure that it has detected your COM port, which in my case is the USB to serial converter. And then you can choose Coco 1 or Coco 2 or 3. Okay, let's see what we have on this floppy. Okay, so now notice when I've loaded HDB-DOS, its default is to the virtual drives, and there's nothing installed over on the PC in the virtual drive. So let's actually take a moment here at this point to clear up something that confused me at first. So looking at DriveWire, I thought that this would be drive 0, drive 1, drive 2, drive 3, and that if I typed at the Coco prompt, if I typed drive 1, that I would set this drive as default, or drive 3, and I would set this drive as default. But that's not what's going on here. So these are the drive buses, or SCSI or IDE bus channels. So channels 0 through 3, and the default channel is 0. So this is actually drive #0. So over on the Coco, we've defaulted to drive #0, which is bus 0. And if we do a DIR there, there's no disk loaded in this drive, or there's no virtual disk loaded here, so we get an IO error. However, if I change over to bus 1, now I should have an image loaded in this virtual bus called 180K RS disk. So let's try a DIR now. Okay, and we see there was drive activity. Let me do that again. Okay, we saw the drive activity light, and we actually are able to see that there is a mostly empty disk there. Okay, so back to drive bus channel 0. I was just confused by that at first, but on bus channel 0 we have 256 virtual drives, or virtual disks I should say. So if we could do a drive 0 all the way through a drive 255, and so now we have 256 virtual floppies in this bus channel 0, or drive channel 0. So each of these 4 virtual drives can have 256 floppy disk images. Okay, now, so suppose we want to access our floppy disk, and this was not immediately obvious to me when I searched on the internet, but I finally figured out how to do this. So you want to do a drive off. Drive off turns off virtual disks 0 through 3 and gives that space back to the physical floppy drives 0 through 3. So now I can do a DIR1, and I'm accessing my actual floppy disk in drive 1. And you can see I have 2 games preloaded on here, and these are not real games. So if we take a look at one of these, okay, and I want to set my default drive to drive 1 so I don't have to keep typing :1 in all of my commands. Okay, we're going to load it from the floppy, and it's just a simple print statement just to prove out the concept. So when I type DIR, it's now going to be accessing drive 1 by default. So I'll get access of that floppy, and there are the 2 games. So let's say this is the games disk that you want to transfer into your virtual PC drive. Let's go over to the PC, and now we need a virtual disk. And I'm going to put a virtual disk in a directory that I'm going to call games1. Okay, there's nothing in here yet. Now I'm going to call on the Toolshed utility called DECB. That's for Disk Extended Color Basic. Okay, Disk Extended Color Basic, DECB. I want to format a disk with the DSKINI command. Let's name the disk image games1.disk, and -3 is for the typical 35 tracks. Okay, so that quickly created a formatted virtual disk. Okay, and it's in this directory. It's called games1.dsk. Let's actually load that disk into our DriveWire 3 virtual floppy array. Okay, I'm going to browse to the new disk that I just created. It's games1.disk. Okay, now it's the virtual disk games1 is installed in our bus channel 0. And again, this disk image will store up to 256 virtual floppies, where each floppy is the size of a standard 35 track floppy disk. Okay, so if the disk is truly there, we should be able to read it with DECB. Let's do a DECB directory. And we have to tell DECB the name of the floppy disk that we're trying to access. And the comma on the end indicates that we're talking about the contents of a virtual floppy. Okay, and it's empty at the moment. Okay, so now let's transfer our real floppy to the virtual floppy. So now drive is still off, so I can still access physical disks 0 through 3. I'm going to back up disk 1 to virtual disk 4. But this was the secret for me, that you need to turn drive off to turn off virtual drive 0 through 3 to remap that space to the physical floppy disk 0 through 3. Okay, now drive back on. And I would rather work with virtual floppy 0. So now I'm just going to do a backup 4 to 0. But again, you can use any one of the 256 virtual disk numbers that you'd like. Okay, now we should be able to read the directory through the virtual controller in our PC. And there are the files, Game 1 and Game 2. So at this point, we've made a backup of a real floppy disk onto our hard drive. But let's say we'd like to examine the contents of one of these basic programs. So let's use the DECB copy command. And we're copying from games1.disk the file called game1.bas. And let's copy it to the local folder to a file called game1.bs. So same file name. Okay. And if we do a directory of our local folder, okay, we've copied game1.bas out of the disk image. So we've pulled it out of the DSK and it's a standalone file. Let's just go ahead and do that for Game 2 as well. Now let's look at one of these games in a text editor, or let's look at one of these basic programs in a text editor. Okay, opening game1.bas in a text editor, we can see that the basic commands or the basic instructions are tokenized. So what if we wanted to see them in plain ASCII? Well, we need to detokenize them. And that's easy, just using a command line argument with the copy command. just turn on tokenization with a -T, copy game 2, and copy game 1. Okay, now let's look at them in the text editor. It's been modified. Yes, reload it. Okay, now the tokens have been replaced with ASCII. And let's just go ahead and take a look at game 2 while we're in here. Okay, so to me this was outstanding. So now I can get all my old games, I can open them in a PC and I can edit them, I can make updates, and I now have a way of copying them back into the DSK virtual disk image and moving them back into a real floppy if I'd like. Or once you've moved your files to the virtual disk images, maybe you just want to leave them there and use the PC as your backup strategy and actual working area for making code changes. Okay, now that we've transferred files from the real floppy over to the virtual floppy, what if we want to go the other way? Let's say we want to edit a file over on the PC and then bring it back to the Coco file system. So at this point we have game 1 and game 2. Let's go over to the PC and create a game 3. Okay, so let's take our game 2, let's say we're going to make a revision on game 2, we're going to call it game 3, and we make our changes, save that away. Okay, let's see, so we have a local game3.bas, and it's only on our, and we have game3.bas, but it's only in this local folder here on the PC. Because if we do a directory of our disk image, okay, it just has the 2 games. So we want to do a copy, right? So let's do a copy with tokenization, but now we're going in the other direction. So we're copying game 3 in the local PC folder into the disk image with a file name of the same. Oh, I have a typo there. We're copying the local file named .bas. Okay, now watch this. We get a copy error, and that's because the local file system doesn't have control of this disk image. DriveWire has control of it, so we need to close DriveWire. And now we'll try to update the disk image. Okay, no error this time. And we can do a directory. Make sure that our new file is in place. Okay, and it is. We'll restart DriveWire now so we can access things from the PC side. Okay. Now, okay, we've restarted DriveWire so we can get access from the Coco to the PC's virtual disk. So let's do a directory now. There's our new game. Let's load it. Oh, look at that. 10 print and 0 print. I'm not sure what happened there. Something in the tokenization, I suppose. What would happen? That is so interesting. So can we delete line 0? Oh, look at that. So that's some trailing text in the file. And I'm not sure if that's because I needed to convert line endings. Not quite sure. If anyone knows what I did here. Okay, to try to see a little bit more about what was going on there, I lengthened the program to 3 lines of BASIC. And listing it. So it still gives me my 3 lines, and it's tacking on this trailing statement. So it still runs, and it just seems to ignore whatever this line 0 is. And if you try to do any accessing of line 0, it doesn't seem to think that it even exists. So I'm not really sure what's going on there. If someone knows, I'd love to know the explanation for that. So I hope that helps someone out there who would like to transfer files between real floppies and DriveWire virtual disk images. It's sure a convenient way, and so much better than what we had in the old days back in the 80s. Alright, besides working with DriveWire, I'm also working on a really special Coco project right now. One of my channel subscribers has a Coco 2 with a video display problem, and his Coco's been broken for a number of years, maybe 3 or 4 years at least. So he sent me his Coco 2, and we're going to repair it right here on AC's 8-bit zone. So make sure you check out my upcoming video on this Coco 2 issue, and we'll try to diagnose the problem, and we'll repair it right here. So I hope you enjoyed this. That's all for now, and until next time, see you then.